What a week. Thanks for checking in with us, everybody. Chris McKinnon here with political analyst John Keller. What a week. We got to start with this, though. I mean, this thing, government shutdown, is going on. This is going to be a record-breaking shutdown, the longest one we've had.
Longest one we've had, and as the damage continues to pile up, the stories of people whose lives are disrupted start to pile up. It's just going to get worse. There's no sign of any end game. And, you know, this just feeds, setting aside the particulars of the argument that's going on over the border wall and so forth, this just feeds everybody's worst perceptions of Washington as a place unable to tie its own shoelaces, incapable of working together effectively. And, you know, it's hard to argue with it. You know, President Trump is turning out to be one of the most inept deal makers that we've ever seen in Washington, and that's really saying something. Compounding his problem is an intransigent Democratic leadership that sees political advantage here. They've got the video in their hip pocket of the president saying, "I'm happy to shut down the government."
Right.
The border wall is poison to their base, just as failure to build the border wall is poison to the core Trump base. It's just a classic Washington, D.C. disaster. And I don't think anybody's going to come out of this smelling like a rose.
Yeah, it's definitely not a good situation there. Starting to see a few cracks here and there within the Republican Senate. Do you think there's going to be enough eventually to put any pressure on Mitch McConnell to actually bring any of these House bills that Pelosi and the Democrats with a few Republicans are passing?
I mean, you zeroed right in on the big question here, because McConnell is the key to everything.
Yeah.
And he's like the invisible man. You don't see him walking out of the White House to talk with reporters after the meeting that blew up the other day, for instance. He's keeping a very, very low profile here. My guess is he doesn't want any part of this. It's starting to make him look bad. He's got members who are up for difficult re-election fights in 2 years. So I think when you see him come out of his, you know, hole, like Punxsutawney Phil on Groundhog Day, if he sees his shadow, that may mean we're nearing an end to this.
All right, well, he is a master politician and
he
legislator, so we'll see what happens there. I want to shift gears a little bit here. We were talking just a little bit about the Democrats, obviously, now in power over on the House. We've got some freshman Congress people, men and women. Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts, making a little bit of headlines with her first speech on the floor and getting a little bit of a light admonish almost.
Yeah, she took to the House floor and started directly attacking and criticizing, harshly criticizing the president by name. That's a no-no under the rules of the House. It's okay to say this administration is nuts. It's okay to say the White House is off the rails, but it's not okay to say, Mr. Trump, you're nuts or you're off the rails. So she was, whoever was in the chair at the time, made an announcement after the conclusion of Congresswoman Pressley's remarks that reminding members you're not supposed to do that. A much more serious incident occurred earlier in the week, Chris, when this Congresswoman from Michigan, at a fundraising event with press present, everybody rolling away on their phones like they are at everything now, she used an extremely foul obscenity to refer to the president and to advocate for impeachment. And I thought rightly was criticized for that. Don't email or tweet me saying, well, the president started it with his foul language. I don't condone that either. You know, just think about in your own life. If you were to use foul obscenities to refer to Kate, how do you think the next morning show would go, Chris?
I'll tell you, I'll be 6 feet underground.
Right, okay, yeah, you wouldn't even think of doing that, because first of all, you're not that kind of person, but that's not the way to get along with people.
Civility. And
I understand in campaigns the rhetoric is heightened. You're trying to cast your opponent as Satan, and you're not. But you know what? The campaign's over with. At least give us a few months of an effort to govern, to find common ground, and to just lower the kind of personalized rhetoric. Even if the president doesn't do it, I think it behooves others of both parties to try.
Right. I mean, and you talk about, you know, obviously with a president, there's term limits. There's an eventual end to the Trump presidency. But for Congress, it keeps going and going and going, and it's got to get together and start working at some point in the future for us to keep moving forward.
Well, you know, the problem is that members of the House are up for re-election every 2 years.
True.
Members of the Senate every 6 years, and the campaign cycle for many years now has been a permanent cycle, and that's really done a number on our political discourse.
Never ending. Everybody could use a little etiquette lesson, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Last thing I want to talk about with John today is Senator Liz Warren.
Yeah.
And
Iowa last weekend, New Hampshire this coming weekend. And, you know, her rollout seemed to go fairly well. They pulled the classic trick out in Iowa. You see the crowds lining up. All the venues they booked for her were too small for the crowds they expected. So this results in coverage that says, well, the venue was packed, and here she is outside speaking to the overflow crowd, and it creates this impression of excitement. Nothing wrong with that. Oldest political trick in the book. Shows that the Warren campaign knows what it's doing in that regard. And look, Liz Warren's candidacy is going to rise or fall on the relevance of her message. We know what that is. There's no surprises about it.
Right.
It's been pretty consistent throughout her political career. A hard-edged economic populism, skepticism about trade, which is something, in a way, she overlaps a little bit with Donald Trump.
Right.
Okay? But if the economy is softening, people are very anxious, that message could take hold within the Democratic primaries. Of course, others have a similar message, Bernie Sanders, to name one. One thing that did catch my eye, Chris, though, was this sort of debate, really among pundits more than anybody else, about whether she's likable enough. Remember Barack Obama versus Hillary Clinton back in the run-up to the 2008 convention, where that was raised as an issue, and that was an issue for Hillary Clinton.
Right.
As we saw, ultimately, a lot of people just didn't like her, and that really hurt her. And Obama was asked at a debate about that, and he was like, oh, she's likable enough. And a lot of her supporters were furious about that. He was dismissive of her. And they say, well, this question would never be asked of a male politician. Well, not quite true. Al Gore versus George Bush. Remember? Bush was the guy you'd like to have a beer with. Gore, definitely not.
Yep.
Unless he was buying, then I'd go for it. But, you know, yes, Liz Warren is likable enough. Not if you're a Wall Street tycoon who's on the receiving end of her vitriol, absolutely. But yes, she's likable enough. Something tells me, it's 2 years out, who knows what the issues will be. Something tells me personal likability is not going to be the be-all and end-all. I just think there's enough serious substantive issues in our country right now that those will matter more than, do I want to have a beer with him or her?
Right. We'll see where we are. We'll see where we are next week, let alone the 2 years down the road, John.
To paraphrase the famous line from the movie Airplane, remember? The guy is frantically trying to fix the mess there, and he says, boy, I picked a bad day to give up drinking. I feel that way about this week.
We'll see how it goes. All right, we'll check in with you next week. John, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Chris.
it, as always. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks.
Have a good weekend.